Welcome to the Be a Human in Business show with your hosts, Tracy Borison, founder and personal branding coach at TLB Coaching and Events, Tara Argo, founder and relationship strategist at Argo Operations, Tawana Taylor, founder and project management consultant at Bootstrap Dreams, Debbie Aquara, founder and principal consultant at Niche Customer Experience Consulting Firm. Let's start the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Be a Human in Business show. And we're really excited to talk to you guys today. And before we get started, we're going to do our shout out to our Miss Debbie, who is doing all the things and contributing to the conversation behind the scenes because she keeps chatting me stuff afterwards. We miss you, Debbie, and we're going to see you again soon.
We do miss you so much.
Today's topic is inspired by a conversation I had with a friend of mine, Anthea Armar, on LinkedIn Live about this concept of a humanity filter. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about, like, what the heck do you mean, Tracy, when you say a humanity filter? And two, how we can make sure we're using that in our business, because we're all humans. And if you're doing a whole bunch of business with robots, this conversation probably not relevant. But if you're doing a bunch of work and business with humans, then this conversation is going to be totally relevant to you, and probably specifically helpful to people in the managerial arena, because we're talking about making requests of people and how people receive that. So I want to let Tawana start, because when we were talking about this theme, one of the things that originally came up was this concept of, like, well, like, what creates your humanity filter? So this filter that we have, that we feel requests maybe bumping against, what creates that for us?
Yes, and if I could put in the caveat, yes, we lean into the professional side of this, but please do not be mistaken. This can also have a positive impact on your personal life if you choose for it to. So to answer Tracy's question, right, using your humanity filter, immediately when this topic came up, I shared with the ladies, that makes me think about my values. The reason why I can receive a request, or the reason why a request may be blocked, right? I have a defense mechanism goes up, or it makes me ask deeper questions to be more clear about what it is that you're asking me to do, is because of where it fits with my personal values. And my personal values are not all that isolated. I think we've had this conversation before too, from my professional values, right? Like I was able to apply for the position, or I was able to bid for the contract, or I was able to receive, whatever the offer for the opportunity was, because it aligned with who I am personally, and then my skills professionally. But if there's something that comes up, if there's a request that comes up that makes me say, well, can you tell me a bit more about that? Why is this important again? Where does this come from? Who does it affect? When does it need to be accomplished? Because I'm trying to make an informed decision about how and if I can serve this request, because a request that absolutely defies my values, listen, how many days do I have to terminate agreement in writing, right? What are the costs? I'm weighing the pros and cons. You know what? This is not a fit for me anymore, right? Like if it absolutely causes me to forsake my morality, there's just certain things that I'm probably not going to be willing to do, right? Like, and willing is the key. Right? There is coercive power, but there's some things that I might not be willing to do. And so as soon as I heard humanity filter and requests and just that sequence of conversation, I was like, values. And we have those. We absolutely have those in business. The question is, are they more than just statements on the wall, or in frames, or at the bottom of your email signature, since we're so heavily virtual, right? You might not be in office and see those wall decor items anymore. But is it more than just a statement, or is it something that we live? So Tara, like, what are your thoughts about humanity filter?
That's exactly what came up for me too, was it against our values, right? So, and this is something that I was thinking about too when you were just sharing, Tawana, is that also, as you're thinking about that humanity filter, what about when people ask requests of us, but also are we living our values to show them who we actually are? Because if they come to us and they ask us a request that they think is clearly fine, and it hits against everything that I stand for, then do they really know me in an authentic way? Right? Because they shouldn't have ever come to me with that, right? Because I actually had something interesting like that happen. And I was like, I don't even know why somebody would ask me to do a certain thing that would go against my values. And so that's something that I would really encourage people to think about too. Values are so foundational. I feel like I scream this from the mountaintop, but you have to know who you are. And you have to be able to share that with others so that they know you in an authentic way, to where they know, and this goes in business relationships and, personal relationships. So they know who you are and kind of where you stand on things. So they don't come to you and ask you certain things. Now, that's not always going to be the case, because there's going to be inevitably those times. But two, if they come back to you, I would say, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, and don't immediately answer, you should know at that point that there's something there for that person. So don't always take it personal either. Maybe it's just that it's something that they just don't feel comfortable with, right? For whatever reason. So I think, again, this goes back to self-awareness. So you have to be able to be self-aware that if somebody says, "Ooh," then you need to take a step back and think about what you've asked. Anyways, sorry, I really get excited about this stuff.
No, I think that's a good point. And the point about us showing up and living our values, right? Because I think specifically in the work environment, there historically anyway are limitations to what we show of ourselves at the office. And if we haven't shown up with our values on the table before, then there's no reason, there's no way for someone to know that about us, right? So at the end of the day, it really does come down to us and how we're willing to show up and do that. And then when you think about that, so now let's just assume, although I don't like to assume, let's assume we're not. Assume we're not showing up as our fully authentic selves, because again, let's be honest, it's hard in some scenarios to show up as your full authentic self. So some things just remain behind the scenes and maybe people don't think other people need to know them about themselves. And so these scenarios happen. Like you said, Terry, you ask someone or make a request of somebody, and all of a sudden you're like, and your ability to see, and like, this is why I love the concept of the humanity filter, right? Like, this didn't like immediately flow through this person's humanity filter. So even if I didn't know what their values were before, this is a red flag to me, to be like, something, I may not know what, but something has put this person's guard up. And from there, we have two different options, right? Have a conversation, figure that out. And it's funny, I remember this, I can't even remember what I was asking questions about, but I remember this happening to me once at work. And my boss made this request of me, and I was so resistant to it. And I'm sure it was like I was in marketing. I'm sure it was something little about like, find out more about this conference, or like try and get a discount on this, or like something that was within the realm of my work. But I just I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't. It was like bumping up hard against the humanity filter, which I didn't have a definition for at the time. And I made her explain to me over and over and over why this needed to be done, because I didn't understand. And it's so interesting now, because I don't remember the scenario, so I can't recall what personal value it bumped up against, but it was clearly that. And then both of us spent 45 minutes trying to get, I'm sure what was a 5-10 minute task actually done, because it bumped up against my filter. And so I was trying to ask questions and learn, and she was just like, get it done, get it done, get it done. And I was like, but I can't. I don't know why.
Yes. That's important.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'd love to hear anybody else's scenarios like that too, or even if you were the person who was like in that requesting scenario.
Yes. So you triggered me with that particular experience, as a as a project manager. I remember the enterprise that I was employed with for quite some time. And if you're a company, if we're connecting on LinkedIn, you can go down and find it if you're curious. But the enterprise I was employed with for a long time served as an enterprise project consultant. And one of the things when I participated in our leadership academy, we had to get 360-degree feedback surveys. I remember reviewing one of the responses, and one of the responses was, Tawana gets so excited about the new project that she fails to see other people aren't as excited. Right? And it was one of those moments that was like, yeah, people do have a filter under which they're viewing the work, right? It's exciting for me because I'm embarking on something new, because that's my whole point. Like, the whole point of my job is to find a new way to do something, right? Enhance it, improve it, initiate it, and finish. People who are already doing such work, they're like, I don't want another new thing to do. I don't want more things to do. This feels like a more thing, not a better thing, not an essential thing. This feels like something else that's on top of things that are already overwhelming. And so through that feedback, I had to learn, right, and make sure that I was operating in the space of people, being human-centric in my project management. I am very tactical and process and system-driven, yet it was all the more evident why it's so important to understand how to navigate people and how to meet people where they are, and finding out what motivates the person so that they can be mobilized to do whatever it is that's required of us or them specifically in their job function. And so even though the request wasn't really about anything moral or immoral, it was one of those moments where people's humanity filters were like, no new project. Like, no, we don't want a new, better way. We know the in the long term, it'll be, yeah, we're going to have a great outcome. But right now it feels like too much, and having to navigate, right? And being willing to ease into and figure out what truly was the opposition, not just for the collective, but for people individually, so that I can then approach that with that person and then empower them and make sure they realize that they had the autonomy of not only how they were going to do it, because we had a what. The what wasn't negotiable. What needed to be accomplished, right? Yes, Tara's putting in the chat, self-aware, right? What needs to be accomplished is not negotiable, but how we do it, and perhaps even when it happens, they had the autonomy to do that. And by being able to utilize that skill set or that awareness or whatever, people were able to be mobilized to a successful outcome. And then they see the benefit and start bringing value to the initiative. So it's not always about, right or wrong or moral or immoral. It's, as Tracy said, as Tara said, self-awareness, as Tracy absolutely promotes and operates in her, life and business, knowing your personal self, your brand. And then, as I talked about, hey, your values, like if you're wondering why that bothers you, or you're wondering why like that works for you, it's because of what you believe. It's because of how you live. It's about what your reality, speaks, and what you choose or don't choose to other people to see. So yeah, that's hard stop.
No, this is so good.
Well, and I want to, Tara, this is making me think of a conversation we had the other day about communication, right? Because really what all these things are is like flags that there's another level of communication that's required here. So like, and I keep coming back to this concept of self-aware too. And if we get to this space where we are self-aware, there's also this acceptance that other people have different perspectives, right? They have different perspectives. They have different filters, and we can't know that unless we have a conversation.
That is right. Something that was coming up for me while you guys were talking too. So this used to happen to me in my corporate careers. There was a lot of gossip, which we know that happens everywhere, right? But I do not do gossip. Does not serve any purpose. It does nothing but drive people apart. So my team and colleagues, they just knew my door kind of stayed a little bit pulled, because they knew that wasn't a boundary to cross with me, because I wasn't going to serve anything. And so they knew that was a value for me. There were several other things that didn't, but that was just that kind of came up for me. And something else that, Tawana, I think maybe that you had touched on too, is that, or no, it was Tracy, when you were talking about how, you had to have a 45-minute conversation. I think another challenge that I would say is that if someone is hesitant, then don't be upset or short that you need to explain where it is that you are coming from, right? Because there is a reason. And so again, it's that self-awareness, and it's learning to, and it is about communication, right? And that's always where issues arise. Lack of communication, miscommunication, it always revolves around communication. And so just stopping and saying, this is why I need it done this way or whatever, but not, and just being okay with that. Because we had that conversation yesterday. Tracy and I were talking about our kids. And I had told Riley that I needed her. She had done some sweeping, and she swept it to a place that I was like, don't do that, because that is not going to be good, And she said, well, why? And I said, well, I always encourage questions. And I said, well, you don't get to ask why. And she was like, but you tell me to ask a question, and that's a question. And I was like, oh. And so it's at times like that, though, that's what I mean. And I should have stopped and taken the chance to tell her exactly why that is. And I showed her, how it kind of gets under this certain thing. And that's why I wouldn't do it that way. But a lot of times I think it just goes down to just allowing ourselves to take that moment and not push somebody into something that they're not comfortable doing, because I promise you that is only going to plant seeds of resentment at some point in the future. And then you're going to have to be digging all that stuff out. So it takes take the 45 minutes and have the conversation versus doing it later when there's a lot more at stake.
Well, but because as we talk about this, it's making me think about that 45-minute conversation, because what happened in that conversation was 45 minutes of my boss trying to convince me that she was right versus her trying to figure out the problem I had with what was seriously, I had no idea what we were talking about, but like it was based on her trying to convince me, right? And it's funny because it's very similar to the situation with the broom and the sweeping, right? Like I don't want you to ask me why I don't want it swept underneath the cupboard, right? Like
I just want it done.
Yes, I want it swept into the dish so it goes into the garbage, right? Because then it's actually swept up.
Yes.
But like we get it's partially human nature, because when we are questioned, we start to defend ourselves, or like our immediate response is defense, right? And this is where we can get past that space of someone questioning us because they're questioning us. They're questioning us because there's something they don't understand. And it's a lot easier for us to be able to share and have a productive conversation with that person if we can actually figure out what is the thing about the situation that is concerning them and then address that thing, instead of me just trying to convince you in an overarching manner about why you should do that. If you keep it's the definition of insanity, right? Like trying the same thing over and over until you and expecting a different result, right? Like you're just telling me the same thing. Like I need something different, but you haven't done the work to like figure out what something different I need.
Yes. This brings up for me, again, if we're emphasizing, the work environment, right? Whatever form of business, professionalism, something in leadership that we would frequent often, anticipate the need. And it was more so for the employee to anticipate the leader's needs, right? But then it's like, well, who's training the leader to anticipate the employee, right? And so when we think about this dynamic of the request and the explanation so that it can be successfully accomplished on both ends. In an ideal world, and I'm going to say this because I can hear somebody, well, if they're doing the job, we shouldn't need to explain, right? Because we know that happens. And sometimes we ourselves feel that way. Like some stuff you just know how to do, like you should know how to do, right? However, there are times where, because there is more than one way too, because who likes rework? You ever been asked to do something? You might have anticipated the need and said, well, how would you like it done? They say, I don't care, I just need it done by 3. And then you go do it, and then they're like, I didn't want it like that. Sir, ma'am.
And you want to say you should have done it yourself?
You want to say that, right? When you say, would you please tell me this time what you would prefer, right? But what that brought up for me was anticipate the need to provide an explanation, not the convincing, because convincing is still not communication, it's not conversation. Well, it's a form of communication, it's just not effective. Convincing is not effective communication, right? Communication, effective communication facilitates a conversation. And so when you have a request, anticipate the need to provide an explanation for understanding and hope to maybe not need it though, right? Like, it's like the preparation thing as a daughter of the Army and a former Girl Scout and stuff. It's like have it and not need it, and need it and not have it. That's the worst. That's the worst. So I would rather anticipate, let me have the what needs to be done. Let me have some suggestions or recommendations perhaps on even how. Let me have an understanding as to the why, because if this person asks, the least I can do is provide that information so we can have a shared understanding on what will empower the person to go forward and be successful. And that's the same thing that I do as a project manager. I try to do that in my parenting. I try to do that in my peers and family relationships. And I absolutely do that with my coaching clients. I don't tell them what to do. That's not coaching, that's dictating. I ask them what is important to them based on what they express needs to be accomplished. And then together we figure out the how. So anticipate the need to have an effective conversation. But if you don't need to because the person gets it, then you just know you're in alignment and you guys go forward and be great.
Well, and it's so powerful to be able to know that too, right? To like,
right.
If you are ready, like if you anticipate that need, and I would like, this is like stars, write it down. I'm going to say it again. I wrote it in the notes, so it'll be in the summary. Anticipate the need to provide an explanation for understanding. Because when you do that, you're right. And if you don't need to provide the need, then like, great, this person and I are like totally aligned with where we're going. And remember that too, right? Remember, this is the request that this person just like owned it and ran with it and was so excited to do it, right? Like that's telling you something about the person as well. And then it's just a win because you already anticipated you would have to explain it. Oh, except you didn't have to explain it. I think that is just so powerful. And the other thing it brought up for me, and I like, you guys, you'd be shocked at how much, and I'm sure parents know, but between parenting and like business is like, there's a lot of similarities. So another one of the things that Tara and I were talking about is this concept of why. And something that I've experienced, so Nicholas is 3. Something I experience so often when he asks me why is I don't have a good reason. And I'm sure that this comes up in the business world too, where you ask someone to do something and they're like, oh yeah, okay, great, why? And you're like, oh no, I don't actually have a good reason for asking this to be done. And there's that other, again, that's our ego coming into play. I was like, well, now I need to figure out a reason and then convince somebody that I was right, instead of being kind of vulnerable in that moment and being like, you know what? I do not have a good reason why you have to do that. Like this comes up for Nicholas all the time, and he'll be like, why do I have to sit on my butt on the chair? And I'll be like, it's safer, but if you're not if you're not doing anything at the table, then like, no, you don't, like, go play over there. Like, doesn't matter, right? And I'm like, wow, no, I don't have a good reason why. And I also think that like, for me, when I say that, I find it so empowering because I feel like it's someone else's rules that have been dictated on me, the reason I think it should be done this way. And then as soon as he asks me why, and I'm like, oh, well, I just got freedom from that. And no, there's no good reason why. And I think my experience moving from the corporate world into entrepreneurship was that there were a lot of things that I did because they were expected of me and I could check the list. And at the end of the day, I went home and all the things on the list were checked. And that didn't, like, it was nice, but it didn't like make me feel fulfilled that I had like checked all the boxes off on this list. And I didn't ever, except for the one time where I did the 45-minute, which we've already talked enough about that. I didn't ask why. Is people were like, do this, do this, do this, do this. I'm paid to come here and do things. And therefore I just do things, but I don't ask why. And then we don't actually get any better. Wow, the sun just like went behind the clouds. Did you guys see that? It really changed the lighting in my room. We don't do anything better because we haven't created this environment where people can ask, well, why? Like, why are we doing that? And we actually take that as useful feedback in being able to ask ourselves, this is a good point. Why are we doing that?
And that should allow us to grow. We have to be able to be vulnerable though. And that our way is not always the right way, which is usually the problem. What you said too?
I just wrote a note. I just wrote a note about that. Is like liberty. And you'll get into the summary. We're getting there, guys. But I just, as you talked about change, Tara, growth, actually, what I heard you say, I made a note, liberty to make a change, right? Like this, all of this brings up opportunity. And it's so easy for us to be pessimistic and look at, the negative, or look at the adversity, or look at the opposition, or we've done gestures and everything to talk about how the defense mechanism of our natural selves, none of us are perfect, right? I don't care how poised we may be. I don't care how culturally experienced we are. None of us are perfect. And the body's first response, the brain's first response is like, well, we don't want discomfort. We don't want discomfort, but this creates an opportunity for us to make a change, to have an impact. And again, with the self-awareness, it's really less about other people changing, because as leaders, we don't make people do things, right? We encourage the change, and everyone has the individual opportunity to respond according to what they believe does and doesn't work for them. And so we have the opportunity to demonstrate change. We have the opportunity to positively influence, and I threw in positively on purpose, positively influence change, because we know other kind of change can be influenced. But it's liberating when we see and anticipate that there is another response. Mm-hmm. What can we do with it? So put it in the chat. We'd like to know, what is your thought on the human filter? Do you have one? If you did, great. If you didn't, now you have a word to define it when something comes up and you feel a little skeptical or reluctant to follow through with what's requested personally or professionally. It's that human filter. It's that self-awareness. And you have an opportunity to ask for yourself more clarifying questions, or to create the atmosphere for other people to ask you clarifying questions, so that there can be a shared understanding and then the liberty to make the subsequent decision. So yeah,
everybody wins.
That's
everybody
right.
Wins,
and we get better all at the same time. Like, it doesn't really get better than that.
That's right.
All the humans, every single person in that scenario has the opportunity to grow as a human and win as a business. Everybody wins.
That's right.
That's it. Do we have any more thoughts we want to do it before we do our wrap up on this?
I'm sure we could talk about this for a very long time.
Oh,
I feel like we've thrown enough golden nuggets so we can wrap it up for today.
Yes.
Awesome. So in short, too, we got them really concise today, because I had to go back. I had to go old school with notepad. But as we talk about using your human filter, your humanity filter, forgive me, values are important. Values are important. Self-awareness. We talked about showing up and living out your values. We talked about communication, and there are levels to communication. Communicating effectively is important. Perspectives. Don't take it personally. If someone has an opposition or a defense or a pause to your request, it's not about you. It's about them. So have the conversation to come to an understanding so that it can happen by any more means necessary, right? Being willing to explain. So there is another response, anticipating the need that provides an opportunity to what again? We've talked about understanding. And lastly, growth. Everyone has the opportunity to grow. And this is liberty, is liberating. It gives us the chance to encourage positive change, to encourage positive outcomes, to encourage more productivity. So use your human filter. Didn't know how to define it for Tracy, and her counterpart brought it up for us. Yay!
Yay! And I will
So
tag.
great.
I'm going to tag Anthea in this one because this is. She takes full credit for this. And you guys should follow her. Follow her on LinkedIn because she has all of the gems to drop as well. But this is, I love, and like Tawana said too, comment below, like what are some of the things that don't pass your humanity filter? What are some of those things where you've noticed like, oh yeah, boom, or like this other person and you're totally aligned, right? Like I would love to hear you guys, well, we would all love to hear what you guys experience now taking this away and looking at it from that perspective of like, oh wow, that did not pass my humanity filter. And yeah, just share with us. Anything else you ladies want to add?
That's it.
So great.
So bring your humanity filter to work, you guys. Bring it into your life. Use it with your kids. It's there all the time. Embrace it.
With your companion.
Yes. Use it in all areas of your life.
Yes.
All areas of living.
And until next time, remember, be a human.
Be a human.